Hello. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Hello, hello. It's so good to chat with you again.
It's always good to chat with you, Dee. I know you really well, but do you mind for the purposes of this video to introduce
Yeah.
yourself, please?
My name is Deanna Gray. I go by Dee. I am a trans queer woman. I've been out for roughly 4 years as trans, 8 years as queer, and let's say 8 months as a woman. So, like, I've had quite a journey on figuring out this identity of mine. My background is this really fun juxtaposition of tech. I've been in software for 15 years, either as an individual contributor writing code to leadership, right? Being in management or leadership consulting. All that combined with from college, I've just been tacking on inclusion work and equity work and justice work. So I have a gender studies degree, and I started our first LGBTQIA ERG at overstock.com. We called it
Nice.
Open, Overstock's Pride Employee Network. And that's still running today. I did a small nonprofit with some folks to do some more DEI work right before DEI became a swear word, and have moved back into software, where I'm actually leaving the country, leaving the US to go to Portugal. So I'm looking for work in Portugal in software. I would absolutely take a DEI job too, because I obviously love doing it. But through growth and understanding myself, it's the first time that I've really fell in love with coding, as I've gotten back into it. Because I was a coder for the whole time. So I did 8 years of coding not knowing that I had ADHD. And so there were days when it was just impossible. So
Interesting.
that's me,
I was just going to
trans,
ask if
queer,
is that
neurodivergent.
even helpful, kind of, to have
It,
ADHD as a coder, or is it
oh,
not helpful?
it can be. It's that, right? That flip of the switch, right? That people with ADHD, we can really dive into something, and I often could, right? I can dive into a coding problem, and I can breathe 5 hours later, right? And oh my gosh, what am I doing? But there was also that a lot of ADHD is really emotional dysregulation. There were those times when I didn't have the tools or understanding for why it was so hard to just start working, right? There were times when I would lay in bed knowing I needed to get up. I'm not feeling more relaxed by laying in bed here. I'm just sitting here anxious, but I can't literally do anything else. I could not move. Again, little work or a whole lot of work I've done with my therapist to find little tools, right? My
Yeah.
most favorite little tool right now is find something small. It'll take 5 minutes to complete. Write an email, send it off, start up the thing, write a little bit of code to solve a little problem, and your body, my body, just flips its switch and says, okay, nope, I can do this. It's fun, and we're okay. It's safe
Yeah.
to start working. So lots of little fun things that you get to do. I still run into those days, but it's been the easiest ever to just jump in and start learning new languages. I'm really
Hmm.
jumping in and learning TypeScript and Node and backend work, and it's just super fun. It's super fun.
Yay. And yes, there's so much in what you're introducing us to. So I loved how you said DEI is now a swear word, but it's not to everybody. Just for those who don't really understand what DEI means, it means diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we all know that there's still a confusion as to even what those three terms mean, let alone what they are together and why they were even introduced as a concept a long time ago. It's not a new thing.
No.
It needed to be something that was more and more brought to the surface as there were more studies and more great tools around it and more focus on creating safe space before we even and maybe we don't take the time to talk about exactly what diversity is, what the difference between equity and equality is, and how inclusivity really looks. But I loved how you were always all about creating safe space, especially creating safe psychological space. And I think that's why you were really into DEI to begin with, right?
Psychological safety was a core piece of creating that just creating a good, healthy work environment, right? This isn't even just making sure people feel nice, right? And I think that was the thing that a lot of people get really confused and concerned about is this is about just making people feel nice. And a lot of people get into DEI thinking that's what it is, right? Teaching
Mm-hmm.
people how to not say anything at all if you don't have anything nice to say, right? Which is like the exact opposite of what psychological safety means, right? If we dive into psychological safety, it is absolutely a DEI term, right? Because it creates inclusion and equity. But psychological safety is a management term. It came out of Google with their Project Aristotle. And they discovered it was the key factor, right? No matter what you were doing across industries, psychological safety determined if you were going to be contributing to a high performing team. That was it. Not the tools you used, not the management style, but did you feel like you had psychological safety? And for them, they defined it for, I don't remember her name now, but for the original author of that study, really just defined it as the ability to provide feedback and understand that it was going to be heard as equal feedback to someone else. Your background is included, not excluded. Oh, I understand that you're going to come at this from some different angle, and that angle is valuable. And so,
Right.
from that angle, with that feedback, how does that change the way I understand the situation? I loved that space, and I've actually moved away from the idea of creating safe spaces because, and this is going to lean right into where we wanted to go next. So I love this
Yeah.
because it leans to this idea that I need to be able to create a space where you are safe at all times. But the problem with that is that you come with an entire universe, right? Your universe is different than my universe. Your universe is filled with all of the experiences you've had, the way you were raised, the epigenetic history that came from your family. All of that determines how you're going to interpret inputs that are coming to you, right? As well as your own personality and your own way to process it. I have all the same things, but they're completely different. I come from a completely different universe. The idea that we're going to be able to meld some space where we cross our universes and I'm not going to accidentally trip on you or accidentally say something or say something on purpose that I think is okay, but totally isn't okay for you, that's just going to happen. The way I like
Yeah.
to put it, this is my motto. There's way too many of us dancing, especially online, and like the amount of interactions we have these days. There's way too many of us dancing for us to not bump into each other, to not step on each other's toes.
True. And to me, when I hear all of this, I'm thinking of intentionality as well. So, like, I've worked in my share of corporate offices. I've been a salesperson pitted against other salespeople, whether it was internally or against the competition. And they created a lot of different sales contests and tried to dangle carrots in front of us like we're greyhounds and eventually make us so hungry we wanted to take a chomp out of somebody else just to get the stupid rabbit at the end or whatever.
Yeah.
Looking back, I fell for it because I was just like, oh, I'm going to be the best. I want the prize. I want the stupid prize. But
Who doesn't
then,
want to be the best?
right. But I look back on it. Oh my gosh, there's a lot of intentional removal of safety to make us uncomfortable just for profit's sake. It wasn't necessarily for our health of any kind. To me, it makes sense that we try to have an intention of treating people like humans and not making work painful. To put it out there that racism's not okay, misogyny's not okay, homophobic tendencies are not okay, and to understand that differences are beautiful and can be celebrated, not punished.
I want to pull back to that example you had, right, where you were talking about this means of trying to control people's motivators in order to get
Yeah.
them to do something you want. And that's, I think, the core at why I love DEI and psychological safety is that it's not coming at it from a, yes, you do all those things, you make it about everyone's beautiful and they have their unique experiences. But when you boil DEI down, what it's really doing is saying there are ways in order to motivate and drive people to do their best work. And part of those ways is understanding and building trust, creating autonomy, building on intrinsic motivators so that people want to do their best work. It comes from the author of The Little Prince, Antoine Saint Exupery. And he has this concept that he talked about a lot that if you want to build a boat, right? You want to build a ship, don't gather the people and tell them where to go chop wood and organize the tasks and divvy them out, right? Instead, gather those people and teach them to yearn for the vast and endless sea. You get people inspired to want to work with you, and they'll go above and beyond. And what happens is they'll go above and beyond if you use carrots and sticks, but they're going above and beyond for the carrot or for the stick. And if you haven't perfectly aligned the outcomes of your carrot with the intentions and the vision of your business, they're driving towards the carrot, not towards your business intentions. And so that's when we look at the Ballmer years at Microsoft, when he said competition is really where it's at. And he pitted his departments against each other. And what happened? They didn't get better, they got smaller, they got tighter. They didn't share information. They tried to poach each other's people, right? They weren't there to make the Microsoft business better. They were there to make their paycheck better, right? But as we shifted
Right.
to where Satwa has really driven this as a, we believe in software development. We believe, and that becomes open source, and their database administration stuff becomes open source. They write Visual Studio Code, which then almost immediately becomes the best coding tool out there because people are invested in a business that's invested in them,
Yeah.
that's invested in the community instead of just trying to meet their like best. And this is what Google ultimately discovered. And so DEI isn't nice. In fact, it's really friggin' hard. Like it's really hard. It's having frank conversations and being challenged about your own feedback. Hey, I think you should be doing this. Well, why do you think that? Let's actually explore that a little bit, and having the ability to have those kind of engaged conversations without it triggering your ego, right? And that's what we're seeing now with these terrible management decisions being done by Musk. Tell me what you did. Okay, what am I going to start doing? Am I going to start performing in a way that's going to be the best for the people that I'm providing services to? Or am I going to start performing in a way that looks best on a piece of paper that I send to someone who has no clue how I do my job?
Right.
Which of those two things am I going to do? I'm going to do the latter because it's going to keep me in my job. Is it going to make my job better? Is it going to make the government better? Is it going to actually going to reduce the amount of waste we have? No, it's going to increase waste. 100% it's
Yeah.
going to increase waste. But that's where, oh, I love it because it's that drive to understand, to break down your own preconceived notions. And that's what we're built on. We see them all the time, right? Best example I like to have, our understanding of criminals, right? How people in my generation, especially, really view criminals as this identification. These are bad people that choose to do bad things because they're bad people. And that didn't just come from anywhere, right? You go to different cultures and criminals are possessed by the devil, or maybe they're just outcomes of a system that doesn't support them. But I was raised with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and I was raised with the gargoyles, right? Here's
Yeah.
the good guys beating up the bad guys. But who were the bad guys? They were often small time criminals, right? People robbing banks and stuff. We never learned who were the henchmen that helped the Riddler, right? Like, why are they
Yeah.
doing this work? when you, as the richest person, Bruce Wayne, in the entire city, could probably employ every single one of those people, right? And provide them with public works jobs that they wouldn't want to go and work with the Riddler, but instead you want to beat the shit out of them. That's what we grew up on. These are bad guys. And so when we hear criminal, when we see someone has a criminal past, that's the story that we have to rely on.
Yeah.
And so if I want to work with someone that got caught up in the opioid epidemic that we recognize was an outcome of malicious behavior by corporations, right? That they flooded these areas with this drug in order to make more money. That's not liberal nonsense, right? There's been a lawsuit and they showed that was the case and they had to settle that lawsuit, right? We
Yeah.
know this is what happened. I'm not going to immediately go, oh, yes, this drug dealer needs help. This drug addict needs help. I'm going to immediately go, how are they bad? Because that's the story I have. And so it's really about helping us tell different stories than all the stories that we were told initially, so that we can
Yeah.
understand the humanity behind everybody. Because if that person's going to come work with me and I want to do the best work I can, I have to do the best work with a human, not a criminal. I have to
Right.
recognize a human. And so it's really a management process. It's not a nice process. All that other stuff's great, and it's the way you get there, but it's not the reason why we do it. The reason why we do it is DEI is merit. That we can't
It's merit.
understand merit without filtering through those stories. And so if we don't deconstruct those stories, we'll never understand the merit of someone in front of us.
And when we better understand that it's actually okay if someone is Black, or if they're a woman, or if they're trans, or if they're queer, or if they're Asian, or whatever, if they're in a wheelchair, if they're deaf, if they're blind. It doesn't mean that just because they don't look and act and sound just like us, that there's somebody to exclude. And innovation comes from diversity. We can't have diversity without inclusivity. And inclusivity is where it's really tricky. That's hard for a lot of people who are so conditioned to only like cishet white people.
We all are, right? Like we were not, neither of us are young enough to have been raised on a multicultural TV set. Like I was lucky enough to watch a whole lot of Star Trek, right? Where I got to see not just one Black guy, but also a Black woman on TV being amazing, helping a white captain understand better ways for him to captain his captainy stuff, right?
Yeah.
That was specifically the Next Generation. That's how old I am. It's, but I think one of the things that I like to try and pull back from is not challenging someone to say it's okay, these people are okay, but rather to say it's okay and understandable that your initial reaction is discomfort. Because I think most people want to be there. Most people
Mm-hmm.
don't want to be a racist. They want to say, oh, I want to live, let live, right? I want to live and let live. But then they don't realize that when they then say, but I don't want them shoving it down my throat afterwards, that they're not letting it live and let live, but that they're letting that discomfort from understanding that we have what, like 7 trans examples in our media from 1990 to 2010. And like most of them were either going to kill you or were
Or
there to,
trick you. Yeah.
when most of us just want you to leave us alone. It's reasonable that you get uncomfortable. It's understandable. It's then challenging that and having the self-awareness and self-strength, really, to be able to
I was
say,
gonna say it comes from self strength. Like as somebody who is ridiculously extroverted. I was just born that way. And I'm learning that that makes me really odd, in that I was super comfortable talking to nearly anybody. And my dad recognized that at a really young age. He was a small town doctor, a country doctor, and would take me to the hospital and let me do rounds with him to visit patients. They might have been dying, they might have been older people and had wires and tubes and stuff going on, and they might have been a funny color. They might not have, who knows, they might have had weird bandages on their head or something. And I would just talk to them like they were just people, and it would make their day. And dad just loved that I could just do that. And
Yeah.
it's interesting because I didn't think that was anything special. But literally, as I'm living my life, I'm still consistently surprised that other people get so uncomfortable talking to other people. And I have to recognize that. But on the other hand, it comes in handy. Like just last night, I was taking the bus back from the social change forum, and this nice fellow walks in onto this very crowded bus and sits a seat away from me. And he's got the winter hat on and a helmet and just looks a little different. And he can't focus on any one person. He's got a different gaze. And he just shouts out real loud, I don't know where I'm going. I can't tell where I am because there are too many people on the bus. There are too many people on the bus. I can't see. I need to get to whatever grocery store. And I just can't tell where we are. And I just noticed nobody. Everyone was like putting in their headphones, everyone's looking away. And I just said, Hey, you're okay. You just got on the bus. I'm getting off at that stop too. So I'll let you know and you can get off with me. Is that okay with you? And he said, Thank you. Yes, thank you. And everyone's like, Oh, yeah. And then he happens to look up because it was uncomfortable for him to look up. He could tell that he was different. He knows he's different. Who knows what he's been going through, trying to get through life as who he is. And then he can see the little scrolling sign that tells you what the next stop is. And he's, oh, if I just read, I'd know where the next stop is. And
But
I said, yep, the signs are helpful, but don't worry. I got you. We're going to take this bus together and we'll get off at your stop. I won't let you get off this bus on the wrong stop. How does that sound? And he's, thank you. And it was just like, that's the simplest thing. What is he going to do to you if you talk to him? I don't understand what the danger is.
let's be real. There is a danger there, right? All women have a story.
Well,
All
I
women,
have those too. It's not from people
right?
like that. It's from overly
Exactly.
confident people,
Right? Like that
like
that's the
true
thing is
creeps. That's not a creep.
that's the story we're told, right? All we're told that story often, that the weird ones are the ones to be nervous about because ultimately they break the social contract and that just makes people uncomfortable. And if we broaden that social contract and we had more experiences, but I love what you said. I'm super extroverted. I love talking to people. You put a bandage on them, and there is something about sick people, and I think this comes from the way I was raised. I think it's a little bit of Mormonism in that there's some, if you get sick, it's probably because the devil, and that means you've probably done something wrong because just people are healthy people. That there's this story of like fear of people in vulnerable situations in the hospital that makes me uncomfortable, where I have a harder time going, let's have a conversation. It's been like that my whole life. And I recognize very quickly that has limited my ability to have interactions like that with
Yeah,
people
yeah.
that especially would enjoy the kind of energy that I can bring to an interaction with them, right? The kind of life that I can bring into a moment. And so it's not something that, like, this DEI thing isn't something that we tell other people they need to be doing better, right? DEI experts, if they're not going, here's the things I'm working on right now, here's the stuff that I'm doing. If you're not doing hard work and recognizing how often you've failed in the past, then you're probably hurting somebody. You're probably actually ignoring and
Yeah.
contributing to the try and do it perfectly. Oh, that perfectly thing.
Yeah, so let's get to that. I really appreciated your comments on LinkedIn lately about how to be brave. I should let you say it. To brave imperfection. To me, this
And this
comes around to intention as well, but I want to hear your way of putting it.
and that's funny because my way was the dancing. I loved that thing. There's too many of us dancing. We're going to run into each other.
Yeah,
And if you were on the dance floor and you bumped into somebody, the polite thing that we all would want someone to do is just go, "Oh, I'm sorry. How can I dance around you better next time? Like, how do we do this
yeah,
better?" That's what we would all want. But this actually came from the Dashlane HR page, right? They were talking about how they were doing DEI. Dashlane was founded in France, moved to Portugal, and then also ended up opening up some offices in the US. And I hope Dashlane watches this so that they know how much I want a job at their place. So please. But their DEI, right? They came in and they were like, we saw how often these awareness trainings and stuff like that caused people to feel less connected, to feel more divisive. And I think part of that is that we have to help some people understand how the world actually works for people that don't just look like cishet white folk.
yeah,
And that's scary. And that makes them want to push back, right? We know that's the case. We show evidence to people of things that they don't like. They're going to believe in false things more than they're going to listen to your data. So, understanding that, they just moved to how to speak to each other with respect. And they really line that up with the idea of acting bravely, not perfectly, because no one can act perfect. There's no way I can interact with you in a perfect way the first time we come together or every time after that. I have no clue what you're going through.
yeah.
I made some offhanded comment to the first trans person that came out to me. It was one of my direct reports. And I was complaining about how my sick kids keep making me sick. And so I tell this woman, I just say, never have kids, making a joke like you do. And she came to me later and she was like, that sucks for me because I can't. Like, I don't have I would love the ability to carry a child, but I can't. I don't have the literal body for it. So those kinds of comments are really hard for me. And I go, thank you for telling me. I didn't have to sit and adopt how much pain and hurt she had. I just had to know that I caused it, even unintentionally, and how to then interact with her in the future. Give her space to talk about it
And acknowledge it,
and just say,
instead of dismissing her feelings altogether, because that's
mm-hmm.
also so common. Whether you're a woman or a man, you get into an uncomfortable
Oh,
conversation and you just want to shut it down and dismiss it. And that's not helping move forward either. That's damaging for a lot of people that you're making their thoughts, ideas, questions, feelings invalid, not worth conversation, doesn't belong, out, delete. We're starting over. That didn't happen kind of thing. And that kind of
yeah.
dismissal is damaging too. So we
Then
have
then you
to
just
be okay with not, we have to be okay with
making mistakes.
making mistakes. And that's just part of being a human. And one of my favorite thoughts about this is if you just look at science, okay, some people are immediately going, oh no, what is she talking about?
Science.
Okay, science, I don't know why science is so controversial, but for those of us who have had a science class, of just a junior high level science class, we learn about the scientific method and how fun it is to have a little experiment. And what we learn very quickly is that you can expect something not to go right in an experiment. And that's okay. That is part of the scientific method. You almost expect something to go wrong, and then you just learn from that, and then you try something else that will work. or we'll give you some data that will actually come up with some conclusion. It might not have been your original theory, but it'll prove something else. And why does everything else in life not go with that cool factor that the scientific method has? It's okay that something's going to go wrong. In fact, sometimes that's the most exciting part. And you know what? That part's going to happen often. Like you almost expect something not to go as planned more often than you expect something to happen as expected. So
It's
why is that okay in science and nowhere else? Like, I think
uh,
and that
yeah,
transcends to so many different things, right? Like beauty
yeah.
doesn't have to look like this exact thing. Like it's, and this is why I loved it when I learned about wabi sabi. And it's something that I have to remind myself of often is that there's beauty in imperfection. And I think that's just one of the most beautiful concepts I've ever heard, beauty in imperfection. And it's an ancient concept. And if we could all just try to adopt a little bit of that, I think that could go a long way.
I love that beauty and imperfections, and especially when we talk about DEI and being trauma informed, right? Understanding that the
Yes.
things that you carry with you affect how you're going to react to things. There was a book I read recently called The Appearing House by Ali Manenko. Love following her. She's super fun on social media. But in this, they talk about these bowls that a long time ago, these glass bowls. I don't remember, but either way, they would fix these bowls with basically gold and yeah, melt gold, connect the bowl back together, and the bowl, all the cracks and everything were now, instead of trying to be hidden like we often try to put bases and bowls back together, they were
Yeah.
really this way of going, here's all the places I broke. But now the thing you've put together, it's not the old bowl. And it's not a broken bowl that's been mended. It's something completely brand new. And that's ultimately what happens with us as we experience trauma, and then also happens a second time as we heal from trauma. We become completely different people. We start interacting with things differently in both cases. And so that,
And maybe are stronger,
and they
maybe
use,
forced those
and it's
cracks.
more beautiful and it's more
Yeah.
unique. And it's
Yeah.
just, but it's important to just recognize that it's different. It's different than what it was. It will always behave and look and do differently than you would expect a different bull to do. And I think that's really cool. So is
And
that what wabi sabi
it
is?
is cool. Yeah, very much 100%. In fact, that exact example is used very often as an example of wabi sabi, or how, for example, trees, gorgeous tree is not gorgeous because it's symmetrical. That's why you can see these beautiful bonsai projects where one branch is so much longer and lower and reaching out differently than all the other ones, or one branch is left dead while maybe it's broken in a ragged way, while other ones are all sinewy looking and curly. That's part of embracing and celebrating the beauty of imperfection. And it's frankly a symbol of life, and that how we can carry trauma with us. And almost, this is actually, oh, I'm not going to say it was a beautiful thing that happened, but my healing out of it has been beautiful. Now I'm still beautiful. Maybe I'm even more beautiful now after surviving and healing and doing all the work that I had to do to be a strong, living, thriving being.
That's literally what my tattoo is about. Is it came from a movie I watched on Netflix where Christian Slater's talking to his daughter, and he's talking about loving the fall because you get to see the soul of a tree. So that's where this whole thing has come from. You
Nice.
get to see the soul of the tree and the way that it bends and breaks and mends and connects to other trees and sometimes even nourishes other life besides its own. All of that happens at the trunk, and you can see it all, and you know that it's all been done to just get a little bit more light, to just have a little bit more life, to grow a little bit more, to survive another season.
Yeah.
All of this stuff that's been done, it looks gnarled and it looks dark, but it's really the process of healing and growing. And then the leaves come back and you see how beautiful that tree is. Like that's just magic to me, right? And I love wasabi. I hadn't heard of it.
I'm glad we talked about it. It's literally the first thing I thought of when you were describing go for bravery over perfection. Just love that. I mean, bravery over perfection is one of those things that you could tattoo on your body.
Right?
Put on a t-shirt, bravery over perfection.
When it looks
Give
like a
everybody
math
little
problem.
sparkly stickers. Yes.
Yes. Yes. Because it's, and I think that's really where we're missing the DEI, and also where we can recognize why there's the fight against it, because it is challenging old stories that ultimately benefit very few people at the expense of very many other people. And we
Hmm.
know those stories have been built into our country from the very beginning. We know we started with racism, and then how that built into eugenics, right? And how that drove then the inspiration for concentration camps in Germany, right? We know these things now. We know these are stories that have been told to us for generations, and those live in us. And so challenging those stories is already hard, but we also have people that ultimately benefit from those stories not being challenged. And so when they're fought against, it's really easy. It's really easy to just say, yeah, this is ridiculous. Let's go back to the way things were because it was easier then. But we missed out on a lot and we hid a lot, and we really did. We missed out on a lot. We don't know a whole lot of history on even computer science, because if women were in charge of leading something, if they didn't have a man in which could take credit, who knows if it was going to actually become part of the overall understanding.
Yeah.
This is what we did. This is what men did, was they hid women and they hid their ideas. And so we're
Yeah.
right? That's not merit based. That is identity based. And so merit
Right.
based is using DEI to recognize those things so we don't do it again, instead of just firing the highest ranking trans person in the government because they're trans, despite a lengthy history of excellence through the US government and the
Yeah.
programs that they did. We just fire them. That's the opposite of meritocracy.
Right.
That is identity politics, right? And so it's hard, but
Yeah.
it is meritocracy. It is the difficult thing that we need to do to ultimately make this world better, because 100% of us are going to become disabled at some point. Unless you're lucky and you die immediately from some freak accident, you're probably going to become disabled, right?
Mhm.
And so if we're not setting that up for everybody, we're certainly not setting it up for ourselves.
We need to have these conversations. We need to talk about this stuff. And the last thing I want to be is toxically positive.
But we had our conversation. We can still have fun too.
Yes, yes. Okay, so here we are. We're these change makers. We are these brave human beings who are advocating for others to be brave as well. We want to uplift and we want to help others shine and be resilient in these interesting times. What does that mean to you to be the glitter?
Shoot, my first thought on Be the Glitter is make sure that there's a whole lot of you left over no matter where you've gone, right? Because you can never get rid of glitter. And that's
Yeah.
ultimately, honestly, the more I think about that, is what it means to me. That was the original intention of this tattoo, which I've shifted quite a bit over time. But it's really make other people's lives better when you're in
Hmm.
them, right? That's, to
Hmm.
me, is what Be the Glitter is. That in the end, you're going to leave, I'm going to leave, and I'm sorry, but some of my glitter is going to be on your hands. It's going to be in your hair. You're going to find it on your cheek or your forehead like a month from now, because you've engaged with me in such a way and I've uplifted your life and helped you feel more whole, more welcome, more safe, more light, whatever it is. I've been there to just say, you've had a better day because you got to hang out with me, right? And I learned all of how to do this from my parents. My mom was just insanely kind to everyone and smiled. She was called Happy Hilda. It was just her name, Happy Hilda.
Oh,
And then my dad was surly looking, but he was really sweet, right? He was the kind of dad that said, I loved you and loved giving you hugs and stuff like that. And he was a furniture salesman. So he knew how to help someone feel good, right? How to help someone feel connected. So, like, that idea, it spans everything, right? The guy that's transporting my stuff from here to Portugal spent 20 minutes talking to me about how his ex-wife has Alzheimer's now and how hard that's been, but how it's been great to reconnect with his kids, to talk of and then we connected because my mom passed last 2 Decembers ago now from Alzheimer's. And we had this moment to connect and share together. And he says after that conversation, I always look forward to you calling. And I'm always calling with random questions and making things difficult before I even signed a contract or paid them any money. And it's just that process of being able to just brighten someone's day means they
yeah,
brighten other people's day. And that's magic, magic, right? I believe that's true magic. I can change someone's view of their whole world that day just by making them feel a little bit better. That's cool. That's just like super cool.
all right. I thank you for that glitter. That was beautiful glitter.
I just really appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation with you. Just from the point of view of the more we get to talk about this, the more people can see what this work looks like and how much joy it can still bring us. Like we were talking about all these dark and heavy things, but here we both are so excited,
Yeah.
so excited to engage with this work and help people feel a little bit better in their world. That I think it is. I think it's this magic of changing the world a little bit at a time.
It
Just
is.
by putting it out there. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. I'm glad that we had this conversation as well. I sincerely hope many other people can resonate with this, recognizing we're really not alone, can find that little bit of aha moment or see themselves in this conversation too. And that's what it's all about.